Around the world, COVID-19 lockdowns are impacting religions and traditions in many ways, including cancellation of worship services, pilgrimages, traditional celebrations, as well as cultural ceremonies. Although many churches, synagogues, mosques, and temples are offering worship through online streamings and other unique ways to worship together, many are still feeling the impact of this pandemic, which continues to disrupt normal worship. Behind me is the Basilica of the National Shrine of the Immaculate Conception that used to hold 4 masses on any given Sunday, gathering more than 3,000 worshippers in each sermon, and about 10,000 on a special occasion, has had to close its doors due to COVID-19. On this episode of Our Voices, we take a look at how lockdowns are impacting religious communities and how clergy are using technology to keep the congregations connected, and how it is safe or not to go back to corporate worship as governments around the world are beginning to ease restrictions on religious gatherings. Hello and welcome to The Conversation. I am Orion Itangishaka. I'm joined by my co-host Ayan Bior and Haiti Adams Fitzpatrick. Countries and territories around the world are enforcing lockdowns on various degrees due to COVID-19 pandemic. Amongst groups that are harshly affected by these measures are religious communities.
Today I'm identifying houses of worship, churches, synagogue, and mosques as essential places that provide essential services. Some governors have deemed liquor stores and abortion clinics as essential, but have left out churches and other houses of worship. It's not right. So I'm correcting this injustice and calling houses of worship essential. Many millions of Americans embrace worship as an essential part of life. The ministers, pastors, rabbis, imams, and other faith leaders will make sure that their congregations are safe as they gather and pray.
Now we have the privilege of talking with Reverend Okure, who is the director of the African Faith Justice Network here in Washington, who's going to help us to understand the impact of these lockdowns on worship. Now, Reverend, we are sitting here at the Basilica that usually holds hundreds of thousands of people moving in and out. It's pretty empty since COVID-19. Some may call this pandemic a taste of faith, and not just for the Christian community, but for other religions as well. What do you say?
That's correct. It's a taste of faith because whether going to church on Sunday, synagogue on Saturday, or mosque on Friday, that is being prevented. However, it has forced people to go into a deeper meaning to ask themselves questions, what does my faith mean to me? And some of them we found that they are already beginning to reflect internally, knowing that God lives in me. And so we find people actually reaching out, being generous more than they normally would be, and paying particular attention to the needs of others. It is meaningful to them, not just being mechanical. So there is a positive side to it. I know that, however, the longing to be together is still there. Yeah.
And Reverend, what have you seen to be the biggest impact on the religious community from this COVID-19?
The Catholic institution, as you were talking about Mass earlier, and so this staying aware, but thanks to modern electronics, like every other religious community, there have been online masses. Some priests have gone as far as collecting the photos, family photos of their members, and pinning them on the pews. And so when the celebrating Mass alone is looking at, technically speaking, the community, but they're in photos. So that's one impact. I know that some churches who were struggling, and so some church staff have seen their salary cut because of the lack of income. And you know that the church members, many of them have lost their jobs too. So it impacts their ability to contribute to supporting the institutional framework of the church.
Some may ask, is the corporate gathering, the corporate worship essential for the spiritual life of a worshiper?
It is essential, spiritual life is anchored on the community, even though it's a personal journey, but it's not a journey in isolation, because how do I relate with you? How do I see the image of God in you? How do I interact with the community? How do I live out my faith? God put us here together to help one another grow spiritually. Yeah.
Yes. Now we're beginning to see governments around the world easing restrictions on religious gatherings. I mean, we've heard President Donald Trump asking governors to open up the space for people to go back into worship. Are we ready? And if we do go back into worship as usual, what would worship look like?
I think on the one hand, there is apprehension on people coming together so suddenly. But on the other, people are anxious to get back. So some churches, in fact, in other countries, they have begun to let people in rather than gather 3,000. They say 300. And so you sign in. After 300, they close the door so that people can have their space. And then, so some churches have multiplied the number of services to accommodate as many as possible. We need to adjust to accommodate people who so desire to be there.
Now, on a side note, Reverend, we've seen a lot of tensions here in the U.S. concerning the death of George Floyd. We've also seen President Donald Trump come out for the first time recently after these protests have begun and was at a religious institution holding a Bible. What do you make of that?
I wish he didn't do that, because some people saw that as a political stunt. And you don't do that when people are hurting. You don't do that when tensions run high. I've seen a barrage of former military wigs come to condemn that action, including a number of religious leaders. That was just uncalled for. Rather than address the nation and try to unite it, so I think it was very insensitive. Pope Francis just said, look, racism is a sin, and it's not pro-life to be racist. Having said that, it is not just the police. Racism here is institutionalized in a political system, in a housing, in a medical system, in the legal system. So it permeates all aspects of our social, political, and even religious life. We should not try to pin this all on the police. Yes, police brutality triggered it, but the racism is not just within the police. Collectively, we have to own the blame. We have to repent for institutional racism, and especially racism against blacks in this country that goes on 400 years. Laws are made to keep people subjugated, disparity in sentencing, educational admission. We can sit here and speak for the next 2 hours. I'll still be speaking on that.